The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Dibble Institute's June free Second Wednesday webinar. I'm Kay Reed and I'm the Executive Director of the Dibble Institute, talking to you today from Berkeley, California. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Kathy Guidry.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here.
Hi, Kathy. Kathy is working on the technical side, so we are in her capable hands. A little information before we start. If you cannot hear me and you can read this screen, use your phone to call in. There's the number there. It's also on the email that you were sent. We have muted you all, but welcome your questions, which we will answer at the end. And please participate. We'll be asking you to type in some answers into the question. When we ask questions, you can also type in your own questions, raise your hand, and participate in our polls. No later than Monday, this archive and the supporting URLs, documents for it will be on our website. And we'll also send you an email with that resource sheet. So to get started, by a show of hands, I'm wondering how many of you consider yourselves familiar with the work of the Dibble Institute? How many of you are, for instance, visit our site or are part of our email newsletter list?
Well, okay, the numbers keep going up and up and up. I would say about 50% are actually familiar with the work of Dibble.
Great, great. Well, to those of you who know us, welcome. I looked at the list this morning, and some of you I know personally, so thank you for joining us. For those of you who are new to the Dibble Institute, I welcome you as well. This is a great work I'm privileged to do, and I'm really, really thrilled to share it. Now, Kathy, if you would put everyone's hands down, I have one more question.
Okay, we're ready.
And that is by a show of hands. How many of you have taught using Dibble's teaching tools, or how many of you are administering programs that use Dibble teaching tools? So maybe you're not familiar with Dibble, but you've used a program, or vice versa. You're familiar with us, but you've not. So I'm interested in who's actually used our programs.
It looks like about 19% of the folks that are with us this afternoon have used our programs.
Great, great. Okay, that gives me some perspective on who's out there. This will not be an advertisement for our materials. We do plenty of webinars on those topics where we really are talking about the field, but it does help me to know who's out there. So let me start this by talking about two of my favorite people. Let me introduce you to Helen and Charlie Dibble. There really is a Dibble in the Dibble Institute, and Charlie was the genesis and visionary that made this possible. Charlie was a jet engineer. He has patents with General Electric for the work he did on electronic jet engines. So a straight-ahead, fix-it kind of guy. He retired in the mid-60s to Redlands, California, his hometown. He returned to his hometown. It was my hometown. I was but a wee lass. He was my church youth group director, and we became friends. Charlie, in that retirement time, spent a lot of time helping youth organizations. He stepped in when the Boys and Girls Club needed an interim executive director. He started a junior achievement chapter. He organized the Kiwanians to do rock concerts for us kids. He really, really loved working with young people. Time passed. Now it's the mid-'80s, and Charlie Dibble is attending his great niece's wedding. We don't know what he said to her, but in response, she said to him, "Oh, don't worry, Charlie, Uncle Charlie, it's just my first wedding." Well, Charlie was pretty aghast by that. Here is this bride in her fluffy white dress being pretty pessimistic about her chances of this marriage succeeding. And he had also seen how family instability had really changed the trajectory of many of his young friends' lives. So being a straight-ahead, fix-it kind of guy, he called up the leading researchers of the day, now we're in the late 80s, and asked them, what do you know about making for long-lasting, successful, healthy marriages? And these researchers were able to go on and on and on, But when he asked them, what do you do to help transmit that information to young people, they would just shrug their shoulders and say, adolescents, how do we reach them? What do we do? So that's how Charlie started the Dibble Institute. He brought 6 of us around his dining room table, and his vision was to use research as a way and to translate research into teaching tools that then could be leveraged by having other people teach them. So now the Dibble Institute is an independent national nonprofit active in all 50 states and around the world. We're a clearinghouse for this field of romantic relationship education. I laugh because I think there's so much to know in this world, and this is a tiny bit of it, but in that tiny bit of it, we know a lot. We also advocate for more opportunities to teach relationship skills to teens and young adults. And then, as I said before, we use research to develop teaching tools that transmit this information and have them evaluated and all that. So that's our founding story. Let me talk a little bit about our core values. As I say, we're very much focused on research. That's what guides our work. That's our ideology is where does the research lead us. Now, we are a pro-marriage organization, but that does not mean that we're anti-divorce. We would like people to be in marriages where there is equal regard and low conflict. Good enough marriages is kind of the way people talk about it, or better. But we're not anti-divorce. 30%, research shows that 30% of divorces should happen. They are abusive of self or others or substances, and they should dry up and go away. And certainly children are better off when they are not in those circumstances. We are not also, even though we're pro-marriage, we're not anti-single parents. There are many, many, many heroic single parents doing heroic work and raising their children. But I'm sure if we asked all of them, they would agree, a majority of them would agree, that it is not easy being a single parent. There was an interesting Search Institute YMCA report out that they asked parents what was their number one kind of like what bothered them the most about parenting, and they said not having a supportive partner. So if you don't have a partner, you certainly don't have a supportive partner. So that's our stance on that. There's not a time where we make presentations in public that people don't ask us, what about the GLBTQ kids in my school or my program? And the answer is, for us, of course, all young people need to be treated with respect, and all relationships can improve with relationship skills. So we intentionally write our programs not to assume the gender of your partner. It certainly works very, very well for young people who are heterosexually inclined, and it works equally well for those who are not. In the context of this webinar, I have tried to include as much research as we know about same-sex families, but frankly, we're looking a lot at long-term, longitudinal research, and the evidence just isn't in. So it's not because of any disrespect that I am not citing that I'm focusing on heterosexual relationships. I'm not citing a lot of same-sex relationships. There just simply isn't enough research for us to really to know what's going on there yet. But again, all relationships need to be, all people need to be treated with respect, and all relationships can be improved with relationship skills. So there isn't a part of our lives these days that isn't being researched, or other people's lives. There's research on grizzly bear hair up in Montana, and there's research on, is it better to suck on your child's binky before you put it in your mouth or to wash it? There's all kinds of research that goes on. And we often, I brought up this MyPlate because I think it's a great way to think about how to structure your food choices, more vegetables, less protein. We use this to improve our lives, and I bet today every one of us did something. We walked 30 minutes, we put on our seatbelt, we wore a bicycle helmet, all because somebody researched that and told us it was a good idea. Well, what people aren't necessarily aware of is that that whole area of romantic relationships, intimate partner relationships, and family formation has been also researched and continues to be studied. It's quite a robust field, especially over the last 40 years as we've been watching families change. But what I realized as I've been in this field for a couple decades now, that we're not really aware of that research, and we don't really use it. So we just think, well, however you set up your love life, it's okay if you're single, raising kids, if you're single and have multiple other partners, if you get divorced once, twice, 3 times, you know, however you set up your love life, it's okay. It doesn't really matter. But it really does matter. Your love life, our individual love lives, our collective love lives, the young people we teach, their love lives, they are not neutral. The choices you make about your love life and how you form your family impacts the rest of your life. And I'll make these in 3 main points. Credit must be given. I tried to do a broad search of the field, and these are my go-to guides for information on the field. State of our unions up in the upper left corner from the National Marriage Project. Was at Rutgers, now it's at University of Virginia. They have this annual report that comes out, always on a theme, and then they also have specific questions they ask, and we will talk about the teen part of that. Not Yet is an important new project, just came out from the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, the National Marriage Project, as well as the Relate group. So we'll talk about that. The Atlantic this last month had a great article on same-sex couples. Lower left, Why Marriage Matters comes out of the Institute for American Values, which is a liberal to moderate to liberal think tank in New York City. Making a Love Connection is a report from Marlene Pearson and Barbara Defoe Whitehead, 2 very well-known liberal types with the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy. And Kay Heimowitz has been writing extensively on marriage as part of a larger cultural phenomenon, and I commend her work to you all. So this is really where I draw from. So to get started, I'd like you to look at this picture. There's 6 objects on the screen, and using your question box, write in the answer to the question, families today are like. So I might say families today are like helium balloons. When they're all filled and working well together, they can lift everybody up, but if 1 or 2 pop, everything can sink. So that might be what I would say. So why don't you type in, pick an object, and complete that sentence for us.
Okay, it looks like we've got a couple people, Kay, saying that it is like a rubber band, a ball of rubber bands.
Okay, and then I need to know why you think that. So I'm sorry if this wasn't clear. So it's like a ball of rubber bands because they they have resiliency to a certain point, and then they, they stretch too far and they break up, or they're like a ball of rubber bands. So if you could just complete that thought, that'd be great.
And here's someone that says, Dana has said it's like a ball of rubber bands. Families made up of individuals that form a larger whole that rely on each other, but still they're separate entities. Everybody likes the rubber band one, it looks like. Someone else someone else has said it's like rubber bands because there are many different types of people that come together as a whole, as one unit. Oh, I've got one. Brianne thinks that families today are like cute little puppies. They may look good and make you feel good, but there's sometimes a mess to clean up. I love that. I love that, Brianne. That sounds cute. That's a good idea. That's exactly right. Tammy says families today are like balloons, constantly expanding. And another dog, Tara says they're like puppies. Let's see why. I'm sorry, it's taking me a little bit longer to do this. Full of energy and eager to be on the run. Let's see. However, they may get distracted easily and can quickly go off course. That's very true. Dixie has said it's like a ball of rubber bands because families are flexible.
Right? Good.
So we got quite a few good answers there.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Well, I think we can all agree as we talk about, what families are like, is that families are different today than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. Ozzie and Harriet have left the building. And here's the headline. Marriages down, divorce up, cohabitation way up. Those are the headlines. And this is the data section. So, those of you who like data, this is your moment to shine. And for the rest of us, we'll just go through these. But I think it's very insightful to see kind of how this all hangs together. This comes from the State of Our Unions, 2012, and these are the same. They report out these same measures every year, so it's very interesting. So the solid blue line in this graph shows the marriage rate since 1960. It's a retreat by marriage, and the phenomenon here is that while, let me just define these terms, we're going to say lower class, and this comes from the National Campaign and the group that did the Not Yet report. We're going to refer to lower class people are people who have not graduated high school, and middle class people are people who have completed high school but not, and maybe had some college but not completed college. So in the Not Yet report, they talked about how for a long time the lower class people have not been marrying, but now the middle class people are retreating. So women who have graduated from high school and have no college, they are also retreating from marriage. And that is what is leading this decline in marriage. Marriage is not going down in people who, what we would call upper class, which would be people who have completed college. Divorce has doubled since 1960. California can take some credit there. We had Governor Reagan. He signed no-fault divorce. Not taking credit in necessarily a good way, but mind you. In the 1970s, the thinking of therapists and others was that if the parents were happy, the children would be happy. So therefore, if parents aren't happy in their marriage, you get divorced, your children will be happier. That, of course, proved not to be true. And this is the headline. The number of cohabitees have gone up exponentially. A retreat from marriage does not mean a retreat from coupling. Now, there are two kinds of cohabitation, in some simplistic forms. There is a cohabitation where people have intentionally chosen to live together because they see a future together. It is on their path to a future goal, a vision of us being together in the long term. That is not necessarily a risky form of cohabitation. What is risky is the kind of cohabitation that happens by sliding. So I meet a hot guy or gal, I move in my toothbrush, next night I move in my jammies and then my slippers and then the dog and the dog bowl, and pretty soon we're living together, but we have not had a conversation, we've not been intentional, and we are probably going into this with different assumptions, one from the other. So so the cohabitation rise makes sense in the context of marriages going down, and just wanted you to know the research that not all cohabitation is bad. About 60% of people who marry now have cohabited in advance. It's not necessarily protective of marriage, but anyway, we can go down that rabbit hole too much probably at this point, but just wanted to give you that overview. Now, children are experiencing families in new ways since in the last 40 years. And the first way is there's just simply fewer families with children. In the 1880s, it was phenomenal. Like 80% of families had children under the age of 18. That was the 1880s. Fast forward to 1980, 100 years later, it was 38%, half of that. And now it's 38. Now it's about 32%. And so this is important because with fewer children, part of families, it means that children as a priority, children as a policy priority. They just have to, they're part of a larger mix. We aren't looking at them so specifically anymore. This is the crux of the matter, though. If you look at the solid blue line there in the middle that goes from 9 to 26%, those are children who are living without their fathers in a fragile family. And then they break this out by ethnic groups. So reducing marriage and increasing divorce and cohabitation means that more children are not living with their two own parents. And when you're living with just one parent, it can often be a fragile existence, meaning food insecurity, issues around jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So even though we've done an amazing work with teen pregnancy, the new frontier is the 20-something pregnancy, because to a child, it doesn't much matter if your mom was 16 or 21 when she had you. If you're still a child of a single mom, it's still difficult. Now this report, this graph came from the report Not Yet, and it shows an important phenomenon that in the 1980s, in the late 80s, the age of marriage, which is the blue line, became later than the age of birth of the first child. So you can see there is what they call the great crossover. So today, slightly fewer than half children, like 48%, are born into unwed households. It may be that mom and dad are still together, but they're not married. And in the middle class that we refer to, high school, some college, it's 58%. It's even higher in the lower classes. So they're thinking, this is what the campaign says, that marriage, that these young people are seeing marriage instead of as a cornerstone event. So what I do to put my life in order is I get my school and I get married and we work together. You know, we live in a little apartment, we eat beans and rice, and, you know, we move up that way. They're seeing it as a capstone, meaning I want to get married, but I don't want, but I'll do it after I do all the other things, after I've bought my house, after I have my career established, after, sadly, I have children. So that's the new, the crossover there. Now, what's really good news, and this comes out of that report from, let's see, State of Our Unions. There's a survey that's taken every year called Monitoring the Future out of the University of Michigan. And for 30 years, they've asked young people to identify their desires for, and this is what language they use, good marriage and family life. And the percentage of seniors who say that that is extremely important to them has stayed amazingly high. I couldn't fit the whole graph on here, but you can see 80% for girls, that's the top line, you know, in the 70% for guys say that it's extremely important to them. And this has gone on for decades. So when we talk about youth romantic relationship education and talking to young people about marriage, we're helping them accomplish what they want. This is still true. There was a recent study from Child Trends with inner city youth, and when asked about their aspirations for marriage and family life, they said the same thing. So this is not necessarily dependent on what flavor of kid you are. I think it's in many, many young people's heads. This is what they want. This graph illustrates, though, that they are less than confident they can get and stay married, that it will last a lifetime. And certainly in a world where there aren't good media models, there aren't good personal models, where many young people have experienced divorce, you can see why they would lack confidence. Now this is important because they have two faulty relationship beliefs. One is that having a child out of wedlock doesn't matter, you know, is experimenting with a worthwhile lifestyle or not affecting anyone else. So it's gone from 40% and 33% for gals and guys up to 55%. So by a majority of young people believe it's no big deal to have a baby out of wedlock. And then they also think that cohabitation is fine. You know, no big deal. It helps us get to know each other better. And we know that using cohabitation as a way to experiment with a partner is not necessarily the best way to find a good partner. So these are two faulty relationship beliefs that, that young people hold. So we know that family formation has changed. Again, marriage down, divorce up, cohabitation way up. But so what? Well, how we set up our love lives matters. How we set up our family lives influences everything else. So I'm kind of tying together love life and family formation because they do naturally come together. So family formation matters for children. And Kathy, why don't you roll that first poll we have?
Surely. Give me 1 minute. There you go.
So we want you to take a poll. I'm not seeing it, Kathy.
And you can mark it right up on your screen. Use your mouse and mark it right up on your screen. And we'll give you all a few minutes, and I'll let you know the results.
If you were writing a want ad, if you're a child, if you're an infant, and you're writing a want ad for parents, what kind of parent would you want?
Okay, it looks like we've got about everyone who has voted. I'm going to close this and I'm going to share it with you. Looks like 91% says babies would want 2 stable parents.
Go to the head of the class. You know, the reason, I mean, I'm in this, so it was not a mistake when I said at the beginning of this webinar that I'm coming to you from Berkeley, California. And you can read into that everything you think that means. So I'm a liberal, happily involved in the marriage world. And the reason I am is because what we know about family formation and how it impacts children. A healthy, low-conflict marriage is really the best way to, the best place to raise children. You know, the divorce revolution in the 70s and 80s gave us a good chance, sadly, to look back and see what happens to young people whose families are no longer intact. And again, and you can see this on the CDC website, you can see it on the National Campaign's website, but young people, and let me just stop and say, you can even correct for family income, family education, geography, you can correct for everything, religiosity, you can correct for everything but family formation. And you find that young people who are not raised in an intact family are less likely to graduate from high school, less likely to get high paying jobs, you know, go into professions, complete college. They're more likely to be involved in juvenile justice. They are less healthy, both mentally and physically. There's a ton of things that happen to young people. Now, is this every young person? Of course not. I mean, Barack Obama was raised by a single mom for a period of time. So this doesn't doom every child to, you know, a bad life. But it's tough, and many young people don't get a great start. What I didn't show on my screen of resources I used, I commend the book, The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce by Judith Wallerstein. Great resource, and she's highlighting the impact of divorce in a very wealthy suburb of the Bay Area here in Marin County, and that will really open your eyes. But again, these are intact married families where the parents, it's low conflict, and a healthy marriage. They think that those outcomes have to do with transitions, that transitions are bad for kids. It's tough on kids. So if a child is in a home and all of a sudden, you know, if the plates have been flying and now they're not flying, and so high conflict went to low conflict, there's a relief. But if it's just a, you know, maybe mom and dad aren't, you know, madly in love anymore, maybe they're going through a rough spot, but to the kid, that's what he knows. And if that goes away, if all of a sudden dad moves out, and this could be dad married dad or dad cohabiting dad, that's a transition. And then another man comes into the house, and then maybe we have to move, and then that man moves out, and there's another man. And so transitions are bad for kids, especially rocky transitions. These merry-go-rounds are bad for kids. And it goes down, I commend this study to you, the Adverse Childhood Experience study done here in California with Kaiser Permanente, a large health maintenance organization, who went to 17,000 of their patients and asked them 17 questions. Things like, were you ever hungry growing up? Did you see your mother beaten? Did your parents separate or divorce? Did you feel unprotected? There's questions about their kind of social, emotional life. And they found a high correlation. If you had 4 or more of these, what's called adverse childhood experiences in your life, your chances of having an unrelated chronic disease, stroke, heart attack, heart disease, diabetes, went way up. And they think, again, that if you're in a turbulent time as a young person, that is going to translate in your health, and it's going to translate in other outcomes of your life. The other way that family formation matters for children is now children are growing up in very complex households where mothers will have multiple fertility with multiple partners. There's 2 issues here. One, it's just very complicated. It's a lot of transitions. If there's a lot of father, I have 3 or 4 brothers and sisters, and they all have different fathers. That's complicating because there's lots of dynamics going on. They've also been able to document that girls raised in a home with unrelated male DNA in the house, so let's say a cohabiting partner, are more likely to mature faster sexually. And then that brings on a host of other problems. And then lastly, it's just, even if it's just complicated. So I know people here, I had some employees who on Christmas Day had to visit 3 or 4 homes because they had mom, her new husband, dad, his new husband, his new husband, I mean, it went on and on. And so the kids, it just complicates kids' life. And so we just need to acknowledge that young people, that this kind of family formation really complicates lives for young people. And family formation matters for adults. This is not, it matters for adults. The research, and this is not causative, so let's be clear. This is correlated. So marriage is not a silver bullet. We have to do everything else. We have to eat our Wheaties and, get exercise, and we need to pay attention to education and health and housing and all that kind of stuff. But if we don't pay attention to family formation, the rest of our lives and the investment we make in others in our society could just crumble. So when they look at couples, they can just correlate that if you look at married people and single people and they have similar circumstances, married people are more apt to have better health, lower rates of injury, and longer lives. And that includes, the health includes both physical and mental health. Again, correlative. Marriage is correlated to earning more money than single men earn more money than, married men earn more money than single men with similar job and education histories. Now here's an example. I was in a taxi cab in New York City a few years ago, and the cabbie, I always love talking to cabbies, so the cabbie's yakking to me about how last weekend he was in Amsterdam, and the month before he bought a hot rod and this and that. And I thought, if he were married, not that these are bad things, I love going to Amsterdam. I like riding in fast cars, so this isn't a values judgment. But if he had been married, he might be making different choices about what to do with his money. Or if he had a child, he might be saying, I need to save up for braces, or I need to save up for college. So we know that marriage helps reprioritize people's lives. Any of you who have children will know that to be true. And if you're a feminist, you'll be, we should all be very pro-marriage, because healthy marriages mean that women are less likely to be abused and less likely to live in poverty. The number one place that young people are abused, going back to young people, is by cohabiting unrelated males in their home. It's part of the biosocial consequences, part of the complexity. Women too, not that there aren't women abused in marriages, but way more men than women are abused in cohabiting relationships. And the fastest way to poverty for women is to either have never married or be a newly single mom and having to raise children on your own. So, so marriage does matter for adults. And marriage formation as a society. You know, we all have, as I say, a dog in this fight. You know, let's see, what was the statistic I read? 30% of marriages or weddings spend $26,000 or $1,000 more for that day. And, you know, good for them. It's all about the bride and groom. But really, marriage is larger than that. And you can just see it by looking at what happens when it doesn't work. So I've just recently learned that 20% of all Americans are involved in the child support enforcement system. You're either a custodial or non-custodial parent, or you're a child. And the only way you get involved in that is if you're not living with your children and supporting them. So we're all over people who aren't living with their children. We have a huge child welfare system where we're taking people out of their families, sadly, because it's not fully functioning, it's not functioning well, and so that's another place that we're all over them. And TANF, which is often for parents who, well, it is for parents who don't have adequate funding, often and mostly single women. So you can see that when marriage works, and there's a lot of other things, like I say, it's not a silver bullet. They still have to, you know, we need jobs for people, we need health care, we need all that other stuff. But if we don't have the marriage piece, there's a lot of trickle-down effect about that then we as a whole society get involved in. As I said before, you know, they tend to see that married people are healthier, wealthier, and less violent. And there's a good discussion to be had of, is that because healthier, wealthier, and less violent people marry, and the sicker, poor, and violent people don't marry? So I think that's a discussion worthy of having. I also think I talked to a professor out of Ball State recently, and he said, well, you know, we can see that where there are economic opportunities, marriage goes up. Where there are not economic opportunities, cohabitation goes up. So you think, you know, this big rush towards cohabitation by the middle class, could it have anything to do with the economic downturn we've had since 2001? So, you know, I think there's some good things to discuss here, but in general, the people who put that Why Marriage Matters report together brought 40 social scientists from all across the various political spectrum, you know, right to left and liberal to conservative, and ask them what they could agree on. And they all can agree on these things. So we just need to pay attention to family formation. And finally, you know, we all care about safety and violence, and they're actually able to plot where they think there'll be more violence versus less violence based on the family formation that's there. That when you have married couples, you tend to have a less violent world. So family formation matters. We have one more poll. Kathy, if you can pull up when I'm interested, before we talk about what we all can do to make a difference, I'd like to know what role you play in this world. Are you using materials? Are you really new, don't know anything about it? Are you administering a program? Are you a policymaker?
We're going to give you a few minutes before we close the poll. Alrighty, I'm getting ready to close the poll, and I will share the results with you. It looks like 71% of you that voted teach relationship skills. And then 18% are new and exploring the topic, and 10% manage a relationship skills program.
Okay, great. Well, then you're going to love this, because I have 3 suggestions. Everything I do is in 3s. So 3 ways we can make a difference. And the first one is oh, there we go, is to teach a relationship skills class. You know, those of you who know me just must be chuckling quietly there. Of course I would say this. But teaching young people relationship skills, I think, is the quickest, most effective way to change this arc that we're seeing. First of all, relationship can be taught. You know, there are actual skills. This is not moonbeams and fairy dust. You can help young people with communications, conflict resolution, how to really know someone, how to make a good choice, how to break up, and depending, developmentally appropriate, you know, you would talk to a 14-year-old boy differently than a 19-year-old guy. So there's a variety of topics, but really that's the nut of it. How do you get along? Empathy, caring, communications, conflict resolution. And young people want this knowledge. For the 70% of you who teach young people, I'm sure you resonate with this, because when you say, we're going to talk about your love life, they're like, oh yeah, I am all over that. This is a classroom in Indiana, and we are continually told that this is the week that everybody shows up, this is the week that everybody does their work, this is the week that they work ahead in their workbooks. It's phenomenal. And I would suggest that there are lots of places you can teach this. You can teach it in schools, one of my favorite places, but churches and after-school organizations, camps. And then we're seeing more interesting, like reentry programs for teens and young adults, and workforce development, and child support services, and Head Start, and all kinds of places where it's very interesting ways to reach young people. And then most excitedly is that what we do is making a difference now. So Charlie started this work because he thought someday in the far future we're going to help these young people have healthier family lives, and we have inklings that that actually could be true. But what we really know now is that when you teach young people to get smart about their love lives, they become less violent, they use alternative conflict resolution strategies, they delay sexual activity, and there's increased communications with their parents, which are huge protective factors. So it's very gratifying to know that you're making a difference today. So that was the easy one. Here's the next one. It's a little harder. You know, let's do something easy, like, or, you know, something more difficult, like, oh, let's change relationship culture. And what I mean by that is sometimes so for instance, I've heard a story of a young couple, and they were in their 20s, they'd finished, or they were in their young 20s. They'd finished their education or their training. They loved each other, they had a good relationship, and they kind of wanted to get married. And the adults in their lives said, well, you know, you're young, you can go to Europe, you know, think about this and that. And so they said, okay, we should do that, and they broke up, and you know, then they ended up not marrying at all. So it's like, well, no, really, if you're finished your training and you love each other and you're in a healthy relationship, then it's fine to get married in your early 20s. We can just, you know, so talking to young people about marriage and relationships and how to build and maintain them is a good conversation for adults to have with young people. We need to reorder, make sure that young people understand that the order that they do their major life events impacts their lives. So if you follow this, you know, this is like the old, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in the baby carriage. If you follow that order, you're going to have way different outcomes than if you go the reverse. So first comes baby, then comes marriage, not, you know, very few teen moms marry. And then graduation, you know, maybe. I mean, they're doing some great work with grads programs and other programs with schools, but it's tough. It's really tough. So we just need to tell young people that really there's a better way to, that will improve your life outcomes if you do them in the right order. And then teaching about deciding. This is remarkable to me, but I have heard more and more stories about how young people don't understand that they can choose about their relationships. So one story is a young lady who had been told by her older brother that sex was expected on the third date. And after she took a class, she said, I never knew I could choose. that I don't have to have sex on the third date. And the other choosing story I have is with a slightly older woman who was in a TANF program, was at a bus stop, and she was taking a relationship skills class. She's at a bus stop, and a guy rolls down his window and says, "Hey, baby, what's your phone number?" She reported back to her teacher, "Before I took this class, I would have not only given him my phone number, I would have gotten in the car with him. And, if I could hear you, I bet there would be some sharp intakes of breath around the table here." But she said, after I took this class, knowing, having this information, I knew he didn't know my name. I know he didn't care about me. And so I said, "I'm waiting for the bus, buddy." And so just giving people the power to choose about relationships, that they don't have to be the victim of their relationship, is a huge skill that we can give young people. And then really focusing on what children need. It's important to tell young adults, you'll be poor, you'll be sad, you'll be lonely, okay. But that may not be motivation enough. We think what will be motivation enough, and I'm sorry these aren't a little sharper, these are copies of billboards that are being used currently in New York City by the Bloomberg administration to get at teen parenthood, teen and single parenthood. And there's lots of outcry, especially among the left, that we shouldn't blame people, we shouldn't make them feel bad. And I think they need to know the consequences, that having a child as a young adult and not being partnered and not being able to really support them disadvantages your children. That's just, it's not a values judgment, that's just the facts. So these are some interesting things, and I think young people want to know that. It's that, again, back to my theme, your love life is not neutral. Then the big picture, if we went up to 40,000 feet, things that could help and are things like, well, economics is impacting marriage behavior, marriage and family behavior. So if we decrease student debt so people could go out and earn a living that could support a family, if people had more opportunities through apprenticeships, those are good policies to move forward. As I said before, we're watching as programs are going into TANF, into child welfare, into child support enforcement, into Head Start, into all these, into corrections, into workforce development. We're watching that happen. If anybody's in this audience, hello, from the federal government, we could use some help here. Just write healthy relationships into some of these grant fundings and make it normal that we can teach these skills, because these skills are not different. Relationship skills in your intimate lives are not much different than relationship skills you need in your work life, and you've seen evidence that people do become better workers because you learn how to communicate and solve problems with others. You can keep people on the job because they're not having a drama at home or a drama with their boyfriend or girlfriend. So anyway, like I said, if you're listening, call me. We can talk. And lastly, those of you who are FACS teachers, I am the unofficial president of the FACS Teachers Fan Club, and so we need to add Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act, No Child Left Behind is up for reauthorization. We need to add life management skills to that legislation to make sure that it receives equal treatment, or at least some treatment, with reading, writing, and arithmetic that is in the current legislation. So over the summer, I know you don't have anything else to do, you could call your representative and ask what their stand is on the Elementary Secondary Education Act and how much you would like to see life management, family life, family consumer sciences skills added into that. So those are the ways we can all make a difference. So, like I said, we use tons of research. We're doing tons of research all around this country. And we use that to better our lives. And we know that there's research on marriage and family life and family formation. And if we don't use that, we put lots of people at risk, and mostly we put young people at risk. So my plea here is today, my pitch, is let's make sure that we teach young people that their love lives matter and that how they form their families matter. and that we can make a better world for young people if we can make that central to our focus. Thank you very much. So now it's your turn. What questions do you have?
We'll give you a few minutes to write them in your question box, and then Kay will be able to answer them for you if you have any questions or comments.
So Kathy, I'm not able to see the questions, so you're going to need to write them.
Well, you must have given a good presentation because so far we have no questions.
Or they've all gone away. No, I see you're all there.
No questions at all?
Wow.
Any comments on the material given? Okay, I know I truly appreciate. I don't think so. I truly appreciate you presenting today because I also have learned quite a few things, and I think that the information you gave is very valuable. It's very important that if any of you want to show, when we archive the webinar, you can also show it to your colleagues or suggest to your colleagues that they go to our website and view it. And that will give an opportunity for even more people to learn all of the foundations behind and the research behind relationship education. So I truly appreciate you doing this today, Kay.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Thank you for joining us. We will archive this by Monday. And if you have any questions, that's my email, kreed@dibbleinstitute.org or kathy@kathydibbleinstitute.org. We encourage you, especially those of you who may not be on our newsletter, to subscribe to our newsletter. You can get to it online on our website, or we've joined the really modern world. If you text Dibble in caps to 22828, that will connect you with our newsletter system and get you enrolled. We also, like modern people, are on Facebook and LinkedIn, or if you want to use the old-fashioned way, there's our address or our 800 number. We also have a P.O. box, but I'll spare you that. Now, I said this wasn't an advertisement, and it's not, but out of a goodwill gesture, if you'd like to use the coupon webinar while checking out in the next 30 days, we'll give you free shipping on whatever you order. So take a look in our Dibble store and have at it.
And you know, that's a great savings. That's 10%. That's a 10% savings. So please take advantage of that opportunity.
Right, right. And then for July, our second Wednesday webinar is Why Teens Hook Up, teaching relationship skills to teens. And we're really going to look at that phenomenon of, how sex and relationships interact and how perhaps we can bend that curve. And that will be by our esteemed colleague, Janet Posmatier, who will be doing that on July 10th. So I appreciate you all being here, and thank you all for attending. I look forward to hearing from you, and keep up the good work. We appreciate your help in our efforts.
And Kay,
thank you so much.
One last thing, Kay. I just want folks to know there'll be a short survey once we close out of this webinar. And it's very short, but the information that we get in order to improve and bring subject matters to you that interest you is very important to us. If you'll take a few minutes to answer that, I appreciate it. All right.
Thank you, Kathy. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good day.